All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. We're going to be exploring the dramatic, almost movie-like geopolitical transitions that really set the stage for the first century. We are talking about a massive, sweeping period of history here. Power changes hands, cultures completely clash, and, ordinary people just get caught in the crossfire of these giant empires. So, how exactly did the ancient world go from Greek globalization to absolute Roman domination? It is honestly an incredible story of cause and effect. We're shifting from Persian control to a totally Greek speaking world, and then finally falling under the iron fist of Rome in just a few hundred years. We're going to see how one single military genius kind of started the whole thing, and how the massive reactions to that shaped the world forever. To make sense of this epic sweep of history, we'll follow a quick roadmap. First, Alexander's Greek globalization. Second, 4 reactions to Hellenism. Then, the Maccabean revolt. Fourth, the Hasmoneans and Roman rule. And finally, Herod the Builder King. Our journey today spans this roughly 300-year window, often called the intertestamental period. It kicks off right around 333 BC when the Greeks pushed in from the west, and it takes us all the way to the death of Herod the Great in 4 BC. Okay, part 1, Alexander's Greek globalization and unifying the ancient world. 10 years. Just think about that for a second. That is the astonishingly short amount of time it took a young military genius, Alexander the Great, to literally conquer the known world. He pushed all the way from Greece down into Egypt, straight across Mesopotamia, and right to the edge of India. I mean, in just a single decade, his campaigns forged this unprecedented, completely unified empire. But here's the thing. Alexander didn't just conquer land, he conquered culture. He instituted Hellenism, which was basically the spread of Greek ideas and this brand new common language known as Koine Greek. Honestly, you can think of Koine Greek as the digital medium of the ancient world. Just like the ones and zeros of the internet connect us today, this common street Greek allowed for totally unprecedented global communication, trade, and eventually the rapid spread of texts like the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint. Which brings us to part 2, 4 reactions to Hellenism and the resulting cultural clash in Judea. So what happens when you try to force a unified global culture onto fiercely independent local traditions? Well, after Alexander died, his empire fragmented. Eventually, a Syrian king named Antiochus IV took control of Judea. Now, he called himself the Illustrious, but the locals, they called him the Madman. And you can see why. His aggressive forced assimilation was just horrific. He banned essential religious practices like circumcision, set up pagan idols, and get this, committed the ultimate desecration by actually sacrificing pigs right on the sacred Jewish altar. That was the absolute spark for a massive rebellion. Faced with all this intense cultural pressure, the population completely fractured into this really fascinating ideological split. On one side, you have the Pharisees. They pulled way back. They wanted to conserve their traditions, completely separating themselves to strictly preserve their religious laws. But on the other side, the Sadducees. These were largely the wealthy elites, and they compromised. They eagerly assimilated. Actually, some of them even underwent surgery to reverse their circumcision just so they could fit in and wrestle naked in the newly built Greek gymnasiums. Wild, right? So we actually see 4 very distinct ways the Jewish population reacted to this forced Hellenism. You've got the Pharisees who separate and the Sadducees who assimilate. But then there were the Essenes who just decided to completely withdraw. They fled out into the desert. By the way, they're the ones who gave us the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. And finally, you had the Zealots who just chose to fight. Honestly, these are pretty incredible mental models that still parallel exactly how groups react to massive cultural shifts today. I mean, do you separate, assimilate, withdraw, or do you fight? And that fight reaction leads us straight into part 3, the Maccabean revolt and the fight for independence. The real tipping point happened during this small-town meeting. An old priest named Mattathias was ordered by a Syrian official to offer an unclean sacrifice on the altar. Well, Mattathias point-blank refused, and when another, compromising Jew stepped up to do it instead, Mattathias actually struck him down. With that single shocking act of defiance, he and his 5 sons fled to the hills and totally launched the Maccabean revolt. Through their different roles, these brothers literally built an independent Jewish nation out of a ragtag rebellion. First up was Judas, wonderfully nicknamed the Hammer. He was this military mastermind who shockingly pushed out the Syrians and purified the temple, which, by the way, is the exact event still celebrated today as Hanukkah. Next up came his brother Jonathan, the diplomat. He used clever political maneuvering to snag the high priesthood. And finally, Simon cemented their power, establishing a lasting, independent ruling family that we know as the Hasmonean dynasty. And instead of just dry textbook facts, this history is absolutely full of wild, heroic character vignettes. Take another brother, Eleazar. Picture this. During a huge battle, the Syrians brought in massive war elephants. Eleazar figures the enemy general has to be on the biggest one, right? So he heroically sneaks right underneath this giant beast with his spear and stabs it from below. He single-handedly takes down the elephant, but tragically, he's crushed when it falls on top of him. So the Maccabees secured an incredible victory. But that brings us to part 4, Hasmoneans and Roman rule. The dynasty crumbles from within. Because, man, look at how far they fell. The very family that won freedom soon became the tyrants they used to fight. One of the later Hasmonean rulers, King Alexander Jannaeus, showed his total disdain for traditional religion by purposely defiling a holy water ritual at a major festival. The crowd of Pharisees was absolutely furious, and they started pelting him with the citrons, these little fruits, that they were holding for the festival. In retaliation, this king of a newly freed people went and crucified 800 of his own countrymen. The Hasmonean rulers just became brutal, slaughtering their own people and proving that absolute power definitely corrupts. Following Jannaeus, his wife, Queen Salome Alexander, took over, and trying to be fair to her 2 sons, she made a disastrous decision to split the power. She gave Hyrcanus the high priesthood, and she gave Aristobulus control of the army. Now, the fatal flaw here is pretty obvious, right? Predictably, the absolute second she was out of the picture, the brother with the army marched straight on the brother with the priesthood, plunging the entire nation into a bitter civil war. This family drama practically rolled out the red carpet for the next great empire. And of course, that empire was Rome. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey just marched right into Jerusalem. Rome didn't even really have to fight for it. They just capitalized on all that Hasmonean chaos. What Rome wanted was super simple: peace in the region so they could collect steady taxes. So by stepping in to stop the brothers' civil war, they easily turned Judea into a Roman client state. To keep this new territory in line, Rome eventually installed a brilliant but terrifying puppet king. This is part 5, Herod the Builder King. Brilliant architecture, murderous paranoia. Now, Herod possessed this undeniable genius. He was literally one of the greatest builders of the ancient world. To secure his reign and really impress Rome, he executed these massive, mind-blowing projects. He built Caesarea, which was an incredible artificial harbor right on the Mediterranean, using this revolutionary underwater cement. He massively expanded the Second Temple in Jerusalem into an absolute architectural marvel. And down in the barren desert, he built Masada, a seemingly impregnable fortress way up on top of a 1,200-foot mesa, completely decked out with massive water cisterns and storehouses. But here's the catch. Herod's architectural brilliance was matched only by his deep, murderous paranoia. Because he was an outsider appointed by Rome, not a true heir to the Jewish throne, he was constantly terrified of assassination. In fact, there's this famous quip from the Roman emperor Augustus Caesar that perfectly captures Herod's madness. He said, "I'd rather be Herod's pig than his son." See, Herod respected Jewish dietary laws enough to spare the pigs, but his intense paranoia led him to literally execute his own beloved wife and his own sons if he even slightly suspected them of plotting against him. And Herod's legacy of brutal fortifications and total Roman dominance eventually culminated in a staggering tragedy decades after his death. 900. That is the tragic number of Jewish rebels who, after the fall of Jerusalem, fled to Herod's desert fortress of Masada. The Roman army actually spent years building a massive dirt ramp just to breach the walls of this impossible mesa. But when they finally broke through, they found nothing but silence. The 900 rebels had committed mass suicide rather than surrender and face Roman slavery. So as we wrap up this explainer, you can really see the grand arc here, right? From Alexander unifying the world with a single language, to those fierce grassroots rebellions protecting cultural identity, right down to the paranoid, iron-fisted rule of Herod under the shadow of Rome. It really leaves us with a heavy question. When empires rely on forced assimilation, deep division, and paranoia just to maintain peace and power, what are the ultimate consequences for humanity? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helps you see the ancient world in a completely new, fascinating light.